Okay, welcome to Mind the Autism podcast. And today we have the privilege of connecting with Ane Travassos, who lives in Brazil and is hyperlexic and was diagnosed with autism 18 years ago. And I've known Ane for a little bit over 2 years. I'm really excited to have this conversation with her. She lives in Brazil, and because she has this tenure being autistic, she isn't newly diagnosed. This is something that she's been aware of her whole life. She has a really unique opportunity. She's had the unique opportunity of being able to observe the spectrum from multiple perspectives, and she's also worked with hundreds of people in supporting them with their new diagnosis and understanding their identity. And so and this is a huge milestone. Thank you. So so
Right.
uh sh- yeah, so thank you for making the time to have this conversation. Can you share what it's like, what it's been like for you, the evolution of becoming aware that you're autistic and hyperlexic from when you were younger to who you are today?
The evolution.
Yes. Some of the
I
things
guess
that you've noticed.
I noticed that my perspective from what was told to me when I was diagnosed and what I think of what about autism and all these things now have changed quite significantly because obviously when I was a child, about 7, and being diagnosed, I believed what the psychiatrists and teachers told me about autism. And with the years, I could not only read and observe in other autistic people and communicate with them about autism to understand it in a different point of view, I also could observe it in myself and understand the difference that it is, like the gap that exists between what doctors and the DSM-5, for example, say about it, and what it actually is in our day-to-day lives as autistic.
What are some of the things that you constantly encounter when you're working with other autistic people, maybe in their socialization? What are some of if you said, here are the three biggest things that I have to deal with when I'm working with other autistic people, what would that be?
I think the first thing is that many autistic people, as I was not told, it's not a problem of socialization. So by thinking it is, and by being told that it is, we as autistic people, we tend to have a lot of internalized ableism, even dealing with ourselves. So the first thing that I would say is that we all need a bit more kindness to accommodate ourselves in the sense that you need to really understand what it is and where it comes from. And I think it's not on Google, it's not a quick research that it's going to get you this information. So it's not that autistic people don't know because they don't search for it. It's because it's lacking.
Mm,
So that's one of the primary things that I observed that is common amongst the autistic community.
mm.
Another
Would,
thing
would
is
it,
that we are all awesome. Never met an autistic person that I didn't look and said that this is awesome. This person is awesome.
Thank you. Um, well, that brings me to my next question about autism itself. How do you define it? We understand what the DSM-5 says. We understand what uh, other definitions. describe it as a disability, so on and so forth. And how do you describe autism?
I don't think it's neither a disorder or a disability. I think it's a neurotype. Um, and also that is not me trying to take away of the struggle that it is for us to live in the society. But for me, the aspect that is disabling for us is the very concept of the society that we live in that does not accept us in any sort of way. It's not necessarily that we have a disorder or a disability to begin with.
Mm. And can you describe what a neurotype is for just in simple terms?
To make it easier, like I wish there was more scientific things for me to talk about it, and I am always pleading like I wish this scientific community would research more about our brains, but from the studies that are available, I can conclude that is a neurotype for the reason being that is it's a group of genes that makes your brain, your limbic system, everything about you is autistic. And it starts forming on the womb because it's genetic. So when you have a disability, for example, that's why they have the separation from disability from syndrome and these things in medicals, because like a disability necessarily have to be a human being that went wrong at some point in development.
Mm.
And with autistic people, that never happens actually. We are
Mm.
fully autistic from the very first cell that forms our brain. And this is you can research that.
Mm. So
It's
it's
a
interesting
thing
that you
that
it's
they
it's
study.
interesting.
So the neurotype is just like there is multiple types of brain and
Mm.
we are one of them.
Right. So
And we
not
say
defective.
brain, but I like to reinforce the idea that um, when you have a different type of brain, you will also, by default, have a different type of sensory machine, meaning your body will also develop atypical.
Right. Right. So we're not defective, just different.
They're not defective
Mm. So it's interesting
or
in some of
disorders,
the
or anything like that.
yeah. It's interesting in some of the literature and some of the things that are funded out there, for instance, ABA, where there are claims by certain clinicians that say that they can cure autism. And sometimes when I hear that, I think you can, if I were to make an analogy, oh, you can cure me being black or you can cure me from being a man. I didn't know that that there was anything wrong with that.
Yes, there is nothing wrong. What they mean usually by cure autism is what they do with most of the therapy there is for autistic children, which is essentially train them to behave neurotypical. And this is quite literally torture, to be very honest. And then there is this dichotomy that people are, oh, it's a disorder, but like, is it a neurodevelopmental problem, or you torture this child until they grew up with development problems because they were being tortured in the process of growing up, you know? Of course, you're
Mm,
going to have multiple problems socially if you never been given a chance to begin with. It's not that you have a disability that disables you socially, it's that it was never for you.
mm. What? So you're in Brazil, and so I would imagine that would be your lens for the way people the way autistic people are treated. What are you noticing globally? Because different countries have they they have different resources that are available to support neurodiverse.
All of them are very minimal, I guess, depending on the region. I do believe, and this is just theory of mine, it's not based on any, because some things that I say is actually like scientific reading. It's research, but this is just a thing that I think about often. That is like there are certain cultures that is much more difficult to be autistic in, and certain cultures that is a little bit. It's always difficult, but like there is degrees according to the culture that you're born in.
That being the case, do you see a way of, or perhaps a global organization providing some type of framework where autistic people, wherever they are, would be able to tap into to receive support, resources, that type of thing?
I think much of the support comes already from the shifting of point of view. I don't believe that any larger scale support and larger scale building of community will ever come when we are still using language like disability, disorder, like, as if we are failing socially, because it's the wrong assumption to begin with. So it's very hard to build upon that,
Mm,
in my opinion. So I think the very shift of perspective scientifically about what autism is already going to be such a relief for many people there in the community. And I think it's going to be easier to form community and accommodation and support for all autistic people once we come from the same uh, presumption, from the same point of view,
right,
which is not the one that we have now.
right. So it sounds that it sounds to me that you're saying that community, changing the dynamic of community, is a way of supporting neur- the neurodiverse community.
Yes,
So
it is. It
if
is.
we
I
were,
really believe it.
okay, so if we
Changing the
were,
dynamic and changing the perspective of how we think and talk about neurodivergency, and in my
mm,
specific case, autism, but like neurodivergence inside of the neurodivergence umbrella, I think if we change the perspective there, it's already like a huge jump to
mm.
a
So
more sustainable support system. And
so that would also impact the way therapy is delivered, wouldn't it?
exactly, that's
Okay.
the precisely the point for me, because once you shift the perspective, you can absolutely uh, change the way that you approach it in therapy
Mm,
and medically also. Because right now, as is considered a disorder, for example, people don't consider that autistic people feel more literally in our skin, for example. They consider this as being a psychological sensitivity,
mm.
which is already proven not true, but this is the general knowledge of normal doctors in the hospital. So imagine that change. Imagine that this very few basic things changing. It's already such a huge improvement in the way that we talk to each other, in the way that we treated inside medical facilities. It's for me one of the very first and most important steps.
Mm. So it's, are you talking about a collectivistic model in community where we are all essential, and because we're all essential and we all have something purposeful to contribute, this disorder type energy, it goes away?
Yes. Yes,
Mm,
a lot of the criticism that I get when I say stuff like that inside the community, I'm talking about, they don't talk about neurotypicals. It's that even if the world was perfect, me or my whatever autistic person would not be verbal, for example. And one, you don't know that. And two, a nonverbal is a flavor of human. Why is that a disability?
Mm.
Who framed the things that we do naturally and the things that we have to do for our nervous system to work well as a thing that is so wrong that is considered a disability? Because most of the things are behavior. So it's a social construct. There's someone who decided that that's not the correct behavior, that we have to conform to a certain neuronormativity model. And by breaking that, we can actually be a community. We can actually be a collective of autistic people. Not talking about, levels of how much disabled you are or this type of things, because again, this does not mean that I'm undermining the struggle of any autistic people whatsoever. I very much understand. And I empathize with all of the trauma, because for me it's trauma, that growing up autistic in this world can cause you. I understand that.
I want to over the years there are certain things that you share frequently, and there are two favorite quotes that I love hearing from you. One of them is, autism is not a monolith, and
It's not.
the other favorite quote, which is a little bit more recent, is and I'm going to read this because I want to get it just right. It says, this is something that you say: the existence of a human being is collective.
It is.
And I don't know if I'm biased, but that really resonates with me. And if that were a condition throughout humanity, I don't think that we would have a neurodivergence conversation. It would just be,
Yeah.
what is your gift? What is your proclivity? Let's add that to our distinctiveness. Let's add that
Exactly.
to our wholeness and our gifts. So yeah, I quite enjoy. I enjoy it every time I hear you say those quotes, because it brings me back to my own purpose and focus on the planet.
For me, that also relates to what we suffer. For example, um, existence is collective. Creating community is a basic human necessity. It's the first thing that you need, and you it is like that. Existence of a human being is collective. So that means that the prejudice, the how much the toll of being outside of it, of being cut out of it, of being singled out of collectiveness and of community of any kind, not been given this space or this type of affection. And I don't mean like any specific type of affection. It's the wholeness of it, the being
Mm,
part of a community, is denied for autistic people from very, very early age.
mm. Yeah,
And
you're
this,
referring.
in my opinion, and this is an opinion, I wish someone would take that and make a more scientific study, but that in itself, it's already what causes a lot of the traits and symptoms that people consider to be um, undesirable or antisocial in autistic people.
Mm,
Because imagine if you are outsider since day one of your life, of course it is going to impact the way that your brain developed. Of course it's going to impact the way that you speak. Of course it's going to impact all these other things, because humans need the community. You can see that
so
by an example that I like to use to prove that community is necessary. is that people go to therapy groups, anonymous, like alcoholic anonymous, narcotic anonymous, and they don't understand much. They don't stop to think what works there. Why does it work? This type of therapy, this model of therapy. And this model of therapy works because they create community. They
Mm,
support each other inside of a community that they created artificially, yes, but they created community. That's all that people need. When you're isolated, when you're an individual, like the idea of individualism, it kills human beings.
mm. As a counselor, that's also one of the precepts in counseling, is that the efficacy or the uh, how a client might grow is directly proportional to the relationship and the rapport that the counselor creates or makes available with their client. It's never with all the modalities and the tools. Those have some kind of contribution, but it's mostly the relationship that's cultivated between the counselor and the client. So yeah, that what you're saying is 100% true, as well as the peer-reviewed research that's been available for many years that demonstrated what happened when you had one autistic person and a group of neurotypical people,
Exactly.
how that person was marginalized, and when they did the inverse, how the autistic people, the neurodiverse people, they had no issues with communication. They
This
connected with one
proves
another.
that it's not a disability on the social part of my brain. It's not.
Mm,
It's not that I can be social. It's that you don't
mm,
understand me. It's very different.
mm. And would you is it too much of a leap to suggest that trauma of not being connected can contribute to some of the co-occurring conditions that are commonly associated with
Yes.
autism?
But that's what I was talking about when I said trauma
Mm,
causes the traits and behaviors that people feel like it's like there's a lot of things. There's genetics, you know, associated genetics. That also is true for neurotypicals. For example, a neurotypical person who was born with a neurotypical brain can be born with any number of conditions that relates to their family history, right?
mm,
As can an autistic people. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily relates directly to your neurotype as much as it relates to your family tree and your genetics. I think there's that to consider because lots of people are trying to make this correlation between certain diseases and certain things that are very bad, but they are also very rare
mm,
genetic diseases and rare and like it can be that the autistic gene and this gene are connected. No, it can be that in your family your mom happened to carry both of them.
mm.
and
Understood.
and that's true for every neurotype outside of autism. It's not difficult for me to see, but it's only look as a comorbidity when it's autistic.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
And for me, that is a bias that the scientific community has towards autism,
Mm.
amongst the many others.
When you look at your journey and you've helped hundreds of people with their diagnosis, um, what are some of the suggestions you have for people who are newly diagnosed and are looking to reconcile their identity?
Um, you're not a faulty horse. You're a normal zebra. And that's important to understand. That's the first thing that helps you. It's not going to solve everything magically, but it's going to give you the look of kindness to look into yourself. And there's a lot of trauma that these people have with being dismissed, with being misunderstood. And it's important to revise all of that, not to put the blame on yourself. It's not
Mm,
you. It's the style of communication of the people around you didn't allow you to share or to connect. But
mm,
that doesn't mean that you are a bad person, that you are broken, that you are this is not true. And this experience of having the diagnosis even late in life can be
mhm,
freeing because of that concept. So you
mm,
understand that there is nothing wrong with you. As a matter of fact, everything about the neurotype of autism and its natural, not trauma related behaviors like steaming, like having hyperfocus, this is beautiful.
mm.
And I hope that you, as a newly autistic person, and everybody that discovers late in life can have this feeling that I have of bliss when I look into autistic people doing their thing, because being autistic is truly beautiful.
Yes. Yes. Well, I'm biased. I believe the same things. Okay. Well, we're almost at time, and I'm so appreciative and so grateful that we had this moment to connect and talk about these things. Normally, I would ask for some resources that you think would be appropriate, but you are a smorgasbord of years and years and tons of data. And so I think it would be better, this is just my opinion, if someone wants to reach out to you and because just so that you can consult with them and maybe support them through their journey, whether it's individual group or maybe an organization needs maybe some neurodiverse affirming maybe they need to transform some aspects of their culture. What is the best way for them for someone to get in touch with you?
I guess through my email
Okay.
address is
All right. Well, we'll
Ane.
just put those in the I'll put that
Okay,
in the show notes. Yeah, good.
yes.
So people don't
I
have
don't
to
know. I don't know
write that down.
YouTube. I'm not a YouTuber.
Okay. All right. I'd like to end this conversation with you having the final word.
I think if you're gonna take away anything from my words today, it let it be the that you are beautiful as an autistic person that you are, and it's not even an exercise of acceptance, because you're not just accepting it, you are loving it. You know,
Mm,
it's it's not only acceptable to be autistic, it's wonderful, it's beautiful. And the world and the neurotypicals, they really, really need us.
agreed. Beautiful final word. Thank you. And I look forward to our next conversation. Bye.
Okay, thank you for having me.